Okay, hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar on Beaujolais. My name is Julia Lambeth. I'm an educator at WSET School London, but I'm just here to assist today, and it will be Victoria Daskal who is taking you through all the content. Just as a brief introduction to the WSET, in case you're not aware, the Wine and Spirit Education Trust is the world's leading provider of qualifications and courses in wines, spirits, beer, and sake. WSET has over 50 years experience in designing and delivering education to help both wine professionals and consumer enthusiasts learn more about wine, spirits, and sake. You can take the qualifications in over 70 countries through more than 800 course providers. So if you're interested in finding out more, do visit wsetglobal.com. Just a little note to say that this event is being recorded, so if you miss any of it for any reason, you will find it on our YouTube page afterwards. If you have any questions as we're going along, please do pop those in the Q&A. We will go through those at the end and try and cover as many as possible. So then to introduce Victoria Daskal is a wine writer, educator, presenter, and consultant with over 15 years experience in the wine industry. Formerly the managing editor of the World of Wine magazine for 6 years, she's also worked in fine wine sales and wine event management before founding her own wine company. Today, she consults for international wine brands, teaches at WSET, and contributes as a freelance writer to leading global publications. So over to you, Victoria.
Thank you so much, Julia. And thank you to WSET for inviting me to do this Beaujolais webinar, which is very exciting because Beaujolais is a region that I'm really, really fond of. I've been probably honestly drinking it as far back as I ever kind of started learning about wine, and every year learning a little bit more and more. And so it's a pleasure to kind of come in and just do this kind of little bit of a bite-sized version of what I love about the region and just sharing some of the context and history about it. Today is Beaujolais Nouveau Day, so many of you will already be aware and maybe have already picked up a bottle for enjoying this evening. But I want to show you that there's a little bit more behind this region than just the Beaujolais Nouveau. So I'll talk about what that is as well, of course, but just a little bit more about the grapes, the geography, and the history and people that have shaped this region. That's what I'm going to focus on today. So just to give you a little overview, what to expect. So yes, as I said, we'll cover off just an overview of the geography. So where is Beaujolais? What is a little bit of the history of this region as well, the Gamay grape, of course, because this is the dominant variety here, the different winemaking styles that you can expect to find here, and then of course we'll finish off with Beaujolais Nouveau. So what's it all about, and maybe finish off with any questions that you might have about anything that I've discussed. So let's get into Beaujolais itself. So if you look at the sort of top corner here, you've got the country France, which is showing you where you'll find Beaujolais. So it's this red little section here, and it's located just south of Burgundy. It's part of the Burgundy region overall, but it's located just south of the Macon region and north of Northern Rhone. So it's right in between those two areas, and it's inland. It's got this sort of moderate climate, doesn't have any influences of sea anywhere there, but it is a region that is focused on the Gamay grape. Within that region, there's 12 appellations, and I'm going to explain them for you. So you've got this bigger kind of zoomed in map of Beaujolais, and the first entry level of Beaujolais would just be the Beaujolais AOC. And that would mean that the grapes can come from anywhere in this region, but really most of them will come from this area here, which is in this kind of lime green sort of color. And that will be more the kind of limestone soils, kind of limestone clay soils down here. And this is where the entry level appellation grapes are sourced from. The next level up of this region by the quality pyramid, would be Beaujolais Village. And this is a collection of villages. It's kind of colored in this dark green, and they're mostly here to the north. And this is technically a step up in quality because there's a little bit of kind of minimal sort of stricter rules about the yields, perhaps slightly different kind of terroirs, maybe a little bit higher quality wine. But overall, I wouldn't say there's a huge difference, a huge noticeable jump yet in terms of quality between the Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village. And I want to stress that also Beaujolais and Beaujolais Village, they come in 3 colors. This can be red, rosé, or white. So this would be firstly coming from the Gamay grape. This is the grape of the region. But if it's white, it'll be from Chardonnay because Chardonnay is also planted here. Now, I want to get to the top of the pyramid, which is this colorful section right here. And this would be the top. This is called Cru Beaujolais. And Cru Beaujolais is 10 different AOCs. So each one of them is a cru and an AOC in its own right. And they're listed here for you on the side. So from north going down to south, you've got Saint-Amour, Juliana, Chana, Moulin-à-Vent, Fleury, Cherub, Morgon, Régnier, Côte de Bruy, which is this sort of actually the Côte de Bruy is the top of the mountain, and then Bruy, which is sort of like a little donut around, but it's actually a mountain. So this is from north to south, the 10 crus. Now, the crus are considered the highest quality, and they only come in red. So you cannot find a white or rosé cru. And so this is essentially a kind of a breakdown of what you'd expect within this region. Now, there is also, of course, this category of Beaujolais Nouveau, which is only ever labeled under Beaujolais AOC or Beaujolais Village AOC. You will never see a Cru Nouveau. But nonetheless, it is a really fun category of wine. There's no there's plenty of cru producers, actually, producers that are based in one of these crus that will make a Nouveau, but they just can't write their cru on that Nouveau bottle. And essentially, what is a Nouveau? It is a wine that is freshly made. It's made from the Gamay grape that was really probably hanging on the vine just 6 to 8 weeks ago. So it's very, very fresh turnaround from harvesting to producing it to actually bottling it and enjoying it within a couple a month and a half's time. And you are releasing it on the 3rd Thursday of November. So that's today from, let's say, 1 minute past midnight, it would have been available for sale. And people enjoy it in a very kind of simple, casual way. It's called a vin de soif because it's very thirst quenching, very relaxing, kind of easygoing drink that you would drink chilled. But this is the point of Beaujolais Nouveau today. But actually, all year round, you have these other very interesting wines being produced that are perhaps a little bit more serious, age-worthy even in some cases. So back to the Beaujolais in numbers, I want to also mention that there's a number of different soil types in Beaujolais as well. This is something very interesting. So you might ask, why is it that in the south is where you get just the Beaujolais kind of AOC, the more, kind of region level versus the really crus up north? And it does come down to the actual geography of this region, the terroir. And it's not just as simple as, well, the down south is where all the limestone is, and then the north is where the granite is. But that is kind of roughly speaking true. But actually, in this region, there's over 300 different soil types. And for, as much as we appreciate that for regions like Burgundy, and we appreciate the kind of nuances that you can find in Pinot Noir from village to village and vineyard to vineyard, you can actually find this in Beaujolais as well. So they have different altitudes, different aspects, and 300 different soil types. And so that's why the areas in the north actually have considerable differences in like different kind of granites, different kinds of sands and clays. And Gamay is a pretty vigorous grape variety. And so in the south, perhaps it's creating something that is not as concentrated, not with as much power and concentration. So up north is where you get the more kind of higher quality grape, and that's where the crus have been identified. Now, one more thing to point out. So as this region is mainly based on the Gamay grape, 95% of the production of Beaujolais is red wine. But there's 2% of white wine, and it's actually growing. The white wine is based on Chardonnay, and actually Chardonnay has been planted throughout this region. We're in the overall Burgundy region. Chardonnay is a Burgundian variety, and there's been pockets all along of Chardonnay growing. Previously, perhaps those grapes would have been going towards something like a Cremant de Bourgogne to make a sparkling wine, because that's perhaps easier to sell under that label for that purpose. But over the years, especially, Beaujolais has been really diversifying its offering. It's not just about red wine anymore. They've really started to kind of invest and expand their white wine offering, partly because there's a global demand for white wine. People like to drink it, especially in warm seasons. And so now they are producing, a little bit more and more of white wine. And rosé as well is growing. So rosé, this will be based on the Gamay grape still. And so the rosé category also is starting to grow. It's still small, 3%, but it's starting to grow. And another new thing that happened is that while Beaujolais Nouveau has always been a red offering, so today you're going to mostly just see red wines as Beaujolais Nouveau, they've just more recently allowed for Beaujolais Nouveau rosés as well. So you might start to see that too. No white Nouveau though. That's not a thing yet. And then I'll just point out too that they have sparkling as a category. Now that's really very tiny, so I don't even have a real percentage to share with you, but you will find it. If you look for it, you can find something called a Perle Rouge, for instance, which is a sparkling red Gamay, or a pet nat, like a Pétillant Naturel. So that's a little bit more funky and will have a more of a pinkish hue to it, also based on the Gamay grape. So you will find this quite a range of wines in this region, which most people just think is, maybe cheap red wine, but actually there's quite a lot of different styles and different terroirs based on these crus as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on to just a few points to say about Gamay Noir. So the reason the name is Gamay. That's the grape variety that is growing here. But there's the long name for it, which is Gamay Noir à Jus Blanc. That's because it's a specific type of Gamay which has white juice inside. So most grape varieties have clear juice inside, whether they're white or black. But there is a kind of Gamay that's a Centurion grape, which has pink flesh inside. It has pink juice. That does exist, but that's not the one that we use in Beaujolais. That's not the one that they're talking about here. So they do in their official records specify it's Gamay Noir à Jus Blanc. And so that's what's planted throughout this region. And it's interesting, it's a Burgundian grape as well. The parents of Gamay Noir à Jus Blanc are actually Pinot Noir and Gouais Blanc. This is another kind of ancient Burgundian grape, Gouais Blanc. And what's interesting is that Gouais Blanc and Pinot Noir are also the parents of Chardonnay. So you could say that Gamay and Chardonnay are actually siblings. So it's not so unusual then to see them planted side by side in this region. As a grape, so many of you are coming here straight from kind of WSET, so I've just put it into WSET terms a little bit for you. This is a generic kind of overview, and you'll see, of course, there's going to be exceptions based on the quality and the producer, but just kind of very simply put, you would say most Gamay would be kind of a medium ruby color, perhaps medium intensity. It could be youthful to developing. A lot of times the Beaujolais that we're encountering is for drinking young, it's for drinking straight away. So in that case, we're looking for those youthful primary aromas. So red fruits, kind of cherries, strawberries, raspberries. If it's of a cru level, then you might start to see a little bit of oak as well. So not new oak, but maybe an old oak barrel that's giving it a little bit of this like oxidative effect, a bit of cedar spice. And yes, those crus can actually age as well. So if they're aging over a couple of years, you'll get a bit of like earthy forest floor, even kind of nice autumn leaves aromas in them. So it can be quite different according to the style and quality. On the palate, it's always going to be dry wine, medium to high acidity, kind of low to medium tannins, obviously a little bit more tannins if it's of a higher quality. And then also this is really relating to the way it's made. I'll come on to that in a minute, how it's made, which is going to influence the tannins. Usually medium alcohol, medium flavor intensity and finish. A lot of them are for drinking now, but you can age some Beaujolais, again, according to the crus. If it's of a high quality, then you absolutely could. So now I want to share a little bit about the history of this region. So just going to be a quick one for you. And please ignore the kind of spaces in between. It's not to scale, but it's just to say that basically this region has been producing wine for nearly 2,000 years. So you have had grapes growing here during ancient Roman times, and there's even some references to that in the names of the crus. So, for example, the cru Juliana is a reference to Julius Caesar. The cru Bruy and Côte de Bruy is a reference to a lieutenant from ancient Rome that was Brulius, that was gifted this land of Montbruy, where he could establish his home and his vineyards. So there has been viticulture here for a long, long time, and all throughout the medieval period. So there has been grapes being grown here. Monks tended here just as much as they did in Burgundy too. But I want to make a quick stop on the kind of 1395 year, which I think was an important year because at that point, Gamay was planted throughout Burgundy, especially around Dijon and Beaune, Chalon. There was Gamay growing throughout, not just Beaujolais. And at that point too, there was a moment where the Duke of Burgundy, Philippe the Bold, he actually banned Gamay from being planted in Burgundy. He made it completely illegal, and he wrote this long ordinance that said, Gamay is a bad grape that's disloyal, and it tastes bad and it's unhealthy for you. And he just gave a lot of reasons why essentially they shouldn't be planting it. And he made producers rip it out and kind of only allowed to be grown in the Beaujolais region, where it was already growing anyway. The reason for that was it wasn't actually a bad grape, or tasting bad necessarily, but it is a very high yielding, vigorous variety. And so it's easier to grow it. It has a thicker skin than Pinot Noir. So it's a little bit more resistant to, mildews and fungus. And so it's a little bit easier. Plus it gives you more fruit. So a lot of producers would perhaps prefer it because they can make more wine out of it. But actually with high yields, the quality does suffer, and it becomes a very simple, thin, not very interesting. And so it was almost sort of damaging the perception of Burgundian wines because producers were, using this high yielding Gamay instead. So they banned it, moved it just to Beaujolais. So that's why now we have this huge concentration of Gamay just in Beaujolais. And I think that was this period where it got really separated from the rest of Burgundy. Then flash forward a couple centuries, I just want to point out that in 1936, we had the establishment of AOCs of Cherub, Chenasse, Fleury, Moulin-à-Vent. These are the crus now that were already given their own AOC status. And then 1 year later, in 1937, Beaujolais becomes its own AOC. So that's when the whole AOC actually emerged. 1951 was the first year that Beaujolais Nouveau, which is what today is, was actually commercialized and written into the laws of the region. In 1970s, very famously, Georges Duboeuf, who's considered sort of the godfather of this region, he started promoting Beaujolais Nouveau internationally. So he took it to the US, he took it to other countries in Europe, really started to promote this more. And perhaps a little bit too much, though, because it was really pushing this very high volume, maybe cheap and easy wine, but it wasn't doing huge amounts for the reputation of this region. And so another key point would have been in 1988, for example, when Kermit Lynch came and he wrote this very famous book called Adventures on the Wine Route, where he discovered some winemakers of this region that were actually doing something different from making cheap and easy wine. They were actually really focused on the vineyard and the quality of the fruit. And they were making something that was less commercial and more terroir driven. And so he identified a few of these producers, and then he coined that term or nicknamed them the Gang of Four. And so you might have seen or heard about the Gang of Four. It's kind of four producers that are really, well, I'll mention them. They're Marcel Lapierre, Jean Foyard, Jean-Paul Thévenet, and Guy Breton. So kind of considered kind of godfathers again, but of the more natural wine movement, of the more environmentally friendly, minimal intervention movement that Beaujolais is then becoming more famous for. It was almost a reaction to the overly produced, cheap and easy Beaujolais Nouveaux. Two more points to make is in 2018, Beaujolais had, previous to this, actually, they had done a huge soil study and they really wanted to understand what was in this region beyond just limestone, clay, and granite. And they dug up lots and lots of their vineyards, and about 1,000 actually, and they identified they have 300 different soil types. So they were able to then apply for to be recognized as a UNESCO global geopark for their amazing soils. And this then influenced some producers of the crus to start applying for Premier Cru status. So this is sort of the now next movements of this region, is that there's no Premier Cru or Grand Cru, of course, in this region, but there's many in Burgundy, but not here. But because of this new understanding of the soil, the terroir, the aspect, it's looking very likely that like crus like Fleury are going to start having in a couple of years, not yet, but they might have Premier Crus coming up if it gets all approved. Okay, so next, just want to go over some of the wines that you can find here. So basically, as I mentioned, there are some rosés coming up. It's kind of been produced from Gamay Grape. There's not much of it, but it is very nice. And an example here would be like a direct press. So the style would be more of a pale pink color, something that looks maybe kind of like Provence, kind of pale pink, very dry, crisp, good acidity. Gamay always gives a great acidity. And so yeah, a really nice style that in this case actually still no oak, as most rosés are unoaked, but there's a bit of lees aging as well that gives it a little bit more of a savory, rounded mouthfeel. Now then the next bottle here I've got is a Beaujolais Blanc. So Beaujolais Blanc, you can have Beaujolais Blanc or Beaujolais Village Blanc, but no crus. And in this case, this style tends to be very, very minimal oak, if at all. And if there is oak, it's usually old. And what they do instead is they kind of do some lees aging and maybe malolactic conversion to create this wonderful mouthfeel, more of a creamy sensation. So it's not as crisp as a Chablis. It's got a little bit more ripeness, more rounded mouthfeel, but it's certainly not as oaky as other Burgundian styles. Then you've got this really famous winemaking style, which is carbonic maceration or semi-carbonic maceration. And the idea here is that these grapes are harvested whole bunches by hand, placed into a vessel that has been flushed out of oxygen. So it's completely kind of anaerobic. They place the bunches into the vessel, seal it, and instead of having a normal alcoholic fermentation with the crushed fruit, they actually have an intracellular fermentation in the berries. And because none of the skins haven't been broken, there's no tannin extraction. There's just this wonderful kind of aroma and fruit extraction. And that occurs for about 2 degrees of alcohol. And then eventually the skins split and an alcoholic fermentation proceeds, sometimes off the skins entirely. But as a result, you get these very fruity, very kind of bright, kind of red fruit. It could be, especially if it's carbonic maceration, you get these kind of bubblegum, strawberry kirsch, sometimes banana notes. So it's and also very little tannin. So that's what makes them so easy drinking and really, really refreshing. Ideally actually chilled as well. So this example here, the Beaujolais Nouveau, that's more likely, that's if you want to try that carbonic maceration style, this will be it. It'll be very fruity, bright, very refreshing, very little tannins, very easy drinking. And then semi-carbonic is when you have some of that carbonic maceration happening, but actually there's also some grapes that were crushed underneath that have normal alcoholic fermentation. So you have a little bit more tannic extraction there. Now, I want to then jump on to something like this, which is an example of a cru. And here, when you get to these levels, they don't really do, certainly don't do carbonic maceration. They might do some semi-carbonic maceration or like a whole bunch fermentation with just some whole bunches in in the fermentation, but they also will then include the use of barrel aging, perhaps. But again, old barrels, something just to kind of create a little bit of complexity, a little bit of kind of smoothing out the wine without putting in too much oak aromas or anything. But it can be just, again, a little bit more complex and then age worthy. And then finally our pet nat style, which is basically the ancestor method ancestral, and therefore you're capturing some of the CO2 from the first fermentation. So it's going to have a little bit of a fizz, a little bit of color, maybe a little bit cloudy, but it's a really fun, fruity, kind of refreshing alternative as well from the Gamay grape. So that's kind of my run through of what's available. And then finally onto the Beaujolais Nouveau of today, if we've got time. So it's just to say that today's the day, from midnight today, 12:01 today, the wines were available. And it's a really exciting time. I don't think some people maybe think it's a bit cheesy and it's just this big, excuse to drink some bad wine, but actually, the quality of Beaujolais Nouveau can be very fun and good. I wouldn't say it's something serious, but it can be really, really food friendly and easygoing, not too complex at all. You'd ideally drink it a little bit chilled, probably pair it with, charcuterie or, duck confit or some kind of nice, hearty or cheese dish, something kind of interesting like that. And you wouldn't then carry on drinking it over the year. It's usually drunk in the first 6 months, and that's about it. Yeah, I think that's probably enough to get you started. And if anyone has any questions, then perhaps Julia could send them to me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Yeah.
What a wonderful overview of everything that's going on in the region. A couple of questions we've got in the Q&A. So if you're good, we'll just kind of have a run through those. So a couple about Gamay, actually. We've got a question that asks if there are any different Gamay clones used. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
Oh, different Gamay clones used. I can't say that I know like specifically different Gamay clones that are used around. I think that the big interest that people talk about is the age of the vines, as it is a big common kind of theme around the world nowadays, is just like the older vineyards. And then I think the older the vineyards, the better the kind of perhaps quality that you can get from some of them. But I'm not sure they really say the clones that are being grown there that I'm aware of.
Yeah, fair enough. It was something that I don't know about either. So, some varieties, they talk about it a lot, not with Gamay. So maybe it is just not as varied. Another question, just where else in France and the world can we find Gamay?
Oh yeah, really good question actually. I think it's amazing actually for such like an internationally known grape, how it is very much the home is Beaujolais, but actually you can find it in other parts of France, including the Loire. There's some really wonderful pockets of Gamay growing in the Loire. And then other actually parts of more central France that are less known, like the Ardèche, for example. You can find some wonderful Gamay there in France. Otherwise, then you don't have to go too far, but you can look towards Switzerland. Switzerland has a lot of plantings of Gamay. And then coming out of Europe, you'll find some really interesting plantings in California. I've seen from Australia and New Zealand, and actually in England as well. There's a couple of Gamay producers as well.
Cool. All right. Lots for us to try and get hold of there.
Yeah.
Excellent. And maybe just a final question. You talked a little bit about the crus of Beaujolais there. I wonder if you could just give us maybe a couple of headline statements about some of the differences between them, the different styles that we can find.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think what people or some people will already know that, for example, crus like Morgon, Moulin Avant, they tend to be the more like powerful, a bit more punchy, a bit more concentrated styles of Gamay. So if you want something a little bit more richer and concentrated, perhaps you look towards Moulin Avant or Morgon. In Morgon, even more specifically, looking for Côte de Pie as the kind of lieu dit that's really, really famous there for, again, more of a powerful style, more definition. It's a little bit of a cliche, but it tends to be that like something like flurry is a little bit more of the delicate style, something a little bit more floral, more lighter. Although, just having said that, if you can absolutely still find specific vineyards of Fleury that are actually also very, very powerful, but generally Fleury is considered the lighter style. Cherub is, or is it, yeah, I think it's yes, Cherub, that is the highest altitude as well. So you get like a slightly more intensity, I think, from like higher altitude, more of a diurnal range there. Good acidity, but also good flavor development as well.
Cool, interesting. It'd be exciting to maybe see some of those Premier Crus come online that you
Yes.
mentioned as well. Excellent. Well, that does bring us to our allotted time. So sorry we didn't get to all of the questions there. But what I will say is just thank you so much to Victoria. Just a wonderful presentation and really kind of clear and easy for us to understand what's going on. To everyone watching, if you haven't done so already, please complete the feedback poll that's come up on your screen. As I mentioned before, the recording of this session will be available on YouTube, but it will also be emailed to all the people that have signed up. And if you want to find out more or sign up for any other events, you can visit the WSETglobal.com website. So thanks again, Victoria. Enjoy the rest of Beaujolais Nouveau Day.
Thank you. You too, Julia. Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye.
Bye.